You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Here on Sox in the Basement, I really enjoy the fact that we have guys that come on who cover the White Sox, and they have no filter. And they're not worried about what anybody thinks of them. They're going to give you an honest opinion. And one of those guys that's been on here several times is James Fox. Formerly, it was called The Loop Sports. It's now From the Sideline Sports. He also writes a little bit for Future Sox as well. How are you, James?
I'm great, man. How are you?
The first thing I want to do is just get your thoughts on this, because I look now on White Sox Twitter, or whenever I'm in a chat room, or if I'm on Facebook, or things get sent to me here at Sox in the Basement, and everybody has these ideas like, let's do this in free agency, let's do that, we should sign this guy, we should sign that guy. The first question I want to ask you, though, is how much money do you really think the White Sox will get up to? If you look at Spot Track right now, they have their payroll tracker up for 2019 and what everybody did. The White Sox payroll, when you add in guys that are on injured reserve, sunk cost, like basically guys they had to buy out or that they had to, absorb some money from a trade or anything else, it was up to $91 million and change. $67 million around there was on the major league roster. The league average would need to be somewhere around $137 million. And I don't see them going anywhere higher than that because the Atlanta Braves, and they're a young team, even though they have $117 million of those $137 million that they spent last year on the major league roster. If you got up to the league average, the White Sox could make the argument, hey, we got the same thing the Braves had and they made the postseason. Would they spend enough to get up to that level?
I'll take the under on 137, but it better be 120. I know, like you talked about going to Spot Track. So if you look at next year's contract, it's literally three players. It's Tim Anderson, Calvin Herrera, and Eloy Jimenez, and it's a total of $14.8 million. Now, that's pre-arbitration numbers, and I'm sure, the listeners saw some of those numbers floating around. MLB Trade Rumors kind of does a guess every year at what arbitration raises will be. Alex Colomé should be like right around $10 million, which I think is too much. I would non-tender him. James McCann's right around $5 million, Rodon's $5 million. So, I think that pushes them close to like $45 million or something like that. But that should still leave them like $80 million to play with, you would think. I hope that when they're winning, it's like near 150. But even though they were 90 in a bad year, I feel like 110 to 120, and I hope they prove me wrong, like that it's more.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. People want to sit down right now and play GM. I love playing GM. I play in a fantasy baseball dynasty league. I love sitting down every year. I've been doing it since back when I was a teenager. If they released in the newspaper, what the free agents were, and they used to put out like a big spreadsheet. I remember the Tribune used to put out a big thing back when newspapers were a thing. They would put out a big spreadsheet of like, here's all the free agents, here's what they made last year, and you'd sit there and go, God, we could go get this guy. Wouldn't this guy look great in a uniform? And you just kind of like guess. I like doing that, but you kind of want to know like what's realistic for your team. You're thinking not the league average next year, but you're hoping somewhere between 110 and 120.
Yeah.
And that's without Alex Colomé in your mind because you don't want to tender him.
Oh, my God. I just think that you can do something else, and he's not that good. Now, I think they'll tender him because I don't think they traded for him to not tender him. I would try to deal him just because I wouldn't pay him $10.3 million. I would go trade for Ken Giles and sign Will Harris of the Astros or do whatever. Colomé in the second half, man, he wasn't that good. And I think they're going to try to win. I just don't know how long the smoke and mirrors are going to work there. And it's only a 1-year deal. That just seems like an easy non-tender to me that everybody's kind of just assumed like he's going to get tendered.
Who else are your non-tenders? I'm assuming Yomer Sanchez, you would non-tender off the list. Are you tendering Leury Garcia? Because I've seen that argument back and forth between people.
I think for $4 million, that's fine. I'm not positive that Robert's going to start with the big club. Obviously Madrigal probably won't. So, Leury's a guy that could play second. He can play short. He can play center. I don't think he's a starter. I think he was exposed a little bit last year, but I mean, yeah, he's fine. And he offers you defensive value at all three spots. Yomer for $6 million is absolutely absurd. I wouldn't be stunned if they non-tendered him and brought him back cheaper because they love him and he loves them. Kind of leads the league in Gatorade baths, but I just kind of think that a guy like Danny Mendick could do the same thing for no money. Look, the Sox have cut the cord before on guys where it's kind of like Tyler Flowers was a bit of a surprise. Matt Davidson wasn't very good, but that was a bit of a surprise. They did it with Avisale too. So I would expect them to non-tender him because there's no way they pay him $6 million, but he could be back. I know Sox Machines got their off-season plans going, and people just tender Josh Osich at $1 million, and it's why? It doesn't really make any sense to me.
Well, one of the other things that I keep seeing, and I've seen it on that site, and I've seen other people say it, is this idea of re-signing Abreu. Now, I am in the pro re-sign Abreu camp, but I am not in the if you have to give him 5 years and $75 million camp, okay? Especially because he's the worst negotiator in history, and you could probably get him for a couple years plus an option. I'd be open to that. What are your feelings on Jose?
Yeah, I think it'll be 2 years and maybe an option. I mean, they do have Andrew Vaughn coming. They have other options. And honestly, Jose's been a good soldier, and he's a good guy to have around, but he's almost at the point where he's at platoon levels, with his bat. He had a 760 OPS against right-handed pitching last year. I mean, he absolutely demolished lefties. So maybe that's his role. Maybe he plays DH or first, and within a year and a half here, he's only facing left-handers, and you just have him around because he's Jose, and this is the only place where he wants to play, and he's got all the Cuban guys on the team and whatnot. But I mean, I'm not giving him 4 years at 70 or something. I think that's crazy. I think it's something 2 years, 32, 34 million, something like that, with a third-year option, and he has to understand that he probably has to DH going forward. I mean, he doesn't like it, but he's going to have to deal with it because I think first base might be occupied.
Well, let's talk now about the recent article that you put out. You were talking a little bit about White Sox free agency, and you talked about a target that you want the White Sox to go out and get. It was in the headline. You want Yasmani Grandal. Now, I like what you have to say. I mean, he's got an over 5 WAR. His WRC plus was 121. Okay, he played extremely well, and the only thing that concerns me about him is signability. You have to remember that he wanted a certain amount of money, and when he didn't get it, he took a 1-year deal and bet on himself. I think this guy would do it again unless you pay him. So is it realistic for the White Sox to get him, and then tell me why this is your number one target?
Well, I mean, I think it should be realistic. Would I bet on them getting him? No, because I don't know for sure that they're going to target a catcher. But, I mean, I think we all know, the White Sox aren't going to be in on Anthony Rendon. They're not going to be in on Garrett Cole. I came on your show and said they were getting Manny Machado. So, we all saw the tragic ending to that story. But I don't really mind if they're not in on Garrett Cole. I get that. This year, after you've seen the growth from some of these prospects, you can make the argument that they should just sign 4 to 5 players. I'm fine with that approach. But I mean, Yasmani Grandal should be one of those guys. And I think last year, the qualifying offer kind of hurt him a little bit. I think he was offered multi-year deals, supposedly one was from the White Sox, but I think it was probably hey, we have to give up a draft pick for you. How would you like 4 years and $55 million? And, I think he turned it down and took the $18 million over 1 year to come back out, test the market again this year with no draft pick attached. I mean, he's a 5 WAR catcher and he's 30. I could see him getting 4 years and $70 million. And honestly, I think that's a bargain for him because I don't think they have that. And honestly, James McCann he was pretty good this year. I mean, he played in the All-Star game, but I do think that James McCann was exposed a little bit. And I think in the second half, he obviously wasn't as good. I think he gets some credit for Lucas Giolito's turnaround. I think he's been good working with the pitchers. I think he hit really well against left-handed pitching, and I think there's a spot for him. But I don't think that means he should be playing 130 baseball games next year. So, how do you get better? Like, well, they want a left-handed bat. There's not a ton of left-handed bats on the market. So I think Yasmani Grandal fits pretty perfectly, actually. And I mean, I think I wrote in the article, he's another Cuban-American. He's buddies with Zach Collins. I think it's a fit, and I really hope they're after him. And, Scott Merkin of MLB.com mentioned in his, one of his recent mailbags that he would be a target. And, Scott's pretty plugged in with some of that stuff. So I don't know. I hope he's right in this case.
So you mentioned in there that he's friends with Zach Collins, but then you're also talking there's a role for James McCann. Is there really room for three guys that can sit behind the plate on a major league roster? I mean, I know we're going to 26 men, but I mean, is there room so all these guys? Because there's going to be the argument of, well, you don't want to stunt Collins because you want to see if he's going to be good. But on the other hand, here's a lefty when there's not a lot of good left-handed bats, and it's a great position to get a guy at who could contribute at the catcher position. And then you got the James McCann camp. How do you juggle that? And do you think that Ricky Renteria can juggle that if he's got all three of those guys on his major league roster?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that 3 fits. And I think, by now, my feelings on Zach Collins, I call myself the leader of the fan club. And I don't know for sure, that James McCann's going to be back after next year. So I guess what I would say is I wouldn't worry about Zach Collins. I kind of think if you can get Yasmani Grandal, just get Yasmani Grandal, and then you figure out the rest later. I mean, maybe they trade Zach Collins for something. What they do need is guys that can get on base, right, and guys that hit for power from the left side. And I think Zach Collins can do both. Yeah, I mean, I think there should theoretically be a spot for all three of them. It just depends on what else they do. I mean, I advocated for JD Martinez as well, and I don't know how that whole thing works out.
Yeah, well, I'm nervous anytime you're talking about a Scott Boras client. Here's an interesting question for you. If the White Sox went out and were able to get Grandal and they were able to lock him down, does Zebby Zavala then become trade bait, or at least somebody that you include in a package to try to pick up something else you're looking for? Because you have a lot of guys in your organization at that point. He's getting towards the back end of his 20s, and some people still consider him to be somebody who could contribute to a major league roster down the line.
Yeah, I mean, so he has fans, but one of the issues with Sebi was that he was really bad offensively in AAA last year. So, I mean, he rose through the ranks to the point where, some people kind of liked him better than Zach Collins, just as a catcher, but he hit for power at Charlotte, but so did everybody, and he struck out at a 38% clip. I don't buy into small sample sizes, but he did look really bad in the majors too. So I'm not even sure he's going to survive the 40-man crunch that's coming before Rule 5 in December. If you found out, one day within the next 2 weeks, Sebi Zavala claimed off waivers by such and such, that wouldn't really surprise me at this point. So I just don't know how high they are on him. I mean, yeah, sure, he could be included in a deal for sure. I just don't know if he has any value.
A neighborhood bar, a Southside tradition, your home base for Sox viewing parties. Cork and Kerry at the Park, 3258 South Princeton Avenue, where they have an incredible menu that includes award-winning burgers, Chicago favorites, wings, beef, pulled pork, mac and cheese, salads, wraps, nachos, and an incredible environment. When I'm getting a drink pregame or postgame, it's over at Cork and Kerry at the Park. And in case you didn't know, you can rent the entire bar out for events. Just visit them at corkandkerryatthepark.com for more details. Cork and Kerry at the Park, at the corner of 33rd and Princeton, right near the park. We'll see you there. James Fox, he's from the Sideline Sports, from the SidelineSports.com. James, I would love to hear your thoughts of realistic pitching free agents that not only do you think the White Sox could go after, but you'd like them to go after. Because I also see some Sox fans all saying, we should just bring back Ivan Nova. I think there's better out there, and I think you need two. I think you need to find a guy that's going to fill that role. I almost put Kopech and Rodon in one slot because of innings counts and Kopech getting in there late, Rodon probably towards the end of the year, and you want to have a pitcher that could probably come in there and eventually become like a sixth starter, a middle reliever type guy who has that versatility, and then you still have to find one more starter for the whole year. Am I right in that thinking, and what do you think?
Yeah, I think they definitely need two starting pitchers, and one of them has to be really good. It's not going to be Garrett Cole. It might not even be Zach Wheeler, depending on how much they spend on the offense. It's like one thing that's like super fascinating for me this offseason is you started the show by asking me how much they're going to spend. I don't know. I mean, they could spend a ton. Like if, I think Zach Wheeler's probably going to get like 4 years and $88 million or 4 years and $90 million. And I think he might be worth it because some of his peripherals are good, but I don't know how many, like if they want to block certain guys. I don't know if they want to go. I have heard that they like Madison Bumgarner.
I like him too. James, I like him too. That's my guy that I would like them to go grab and bring him in there as a veteran present with those young guys, with all those playoff appearances, all those World Series appearances. He still has peripherals that show me that he can be one hell of a contributor if you sign him for a couple of years. And you could probably get him for 3 to 4 years, which fits in the Reinsdorf thing.
Yeah, so the question about Madison Bumgarner is like, does he want to come to the American League because he loves to hit? So I think one of the big questions is I think he might stay in the National League for that reason. I think another guy that I've seen mentioned that I wouldn't mind is Jake Odorizzi. He slots in probably in like a number 3 or number 4 role, but he was pretty good for the Twins this year. Like he had bad starts, which inflated his ERA, but he had a lot of good starts. I'd be pretty surprised if it's like Madison Bumgarner and Jake Odorizzi. I think it'll be one fairly significant big name number 2 type starter and then a flyer per se, like, somebody like Tanner Roark or, even Felix Hernandez, somebody that, because I don't really think they trust Reynaldo Lopez. And you can't have too many starters. I mean, I've seen people that are like, oh, they need one starter because they have all these young guys. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like nobody's ever had too much pitching. I think they need 2 starting pitchers.
Let me ask you this though, and it's funny. Whenever I look at the free agent pitcher list, the guy from the Dodgers, Ryu, is always up there, but nobody ever talks about him. Is the belief that the Dodgers are going to sign him and nobody will even have a chance? Is the belief that was the best you're ever going to get out of him and it would be a mistake to sign him when he's already 33 years old? Like, why does he never get mentioned when people are talking about potential starting pitchers?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's really good. He was awesome last year. I guess I just assume that those guys are going to stay on the West Coast. Like, it's rare that and he's like, 33? So I think he'll have offers. Like, I don't know, a lot of those Japanese players like to stay West. So I guess I just assume that, like, he's not an option. But I mean, if one day, like, the White Sox signed him, like that would be great. I mean, they don't really have a left-handed starter in the pipeline. That's why I guess I started with Bumgarner and Keuchel. But, just like on the hitter side, like you don't necessarily want to be a slave to handedness this offseason. You just want like as good of players as you can get. That's fine. I do think they're going to sign pitching. There's snark all over Twitter, like, oh yeah, they're going to sign Felix Hernandez and Ivan Nova. Like, that's fine. Like, they haven't really earned the benefit of the doubt, but like there's no way that's their plan.
I think you and I have talked about this before. There are different types of White Sox fans, and it's never been more apparent to me than it is right here at the end of the season, beginning of this offseason. People have really separated into different groups, everywhere from the people that are so negative that it's all going to fall apart and nothing good is going to happen, to the people that are like, yeah, they're going to go sign some guys, but it's going to be all the guys you don't want, to the people that may sit there and say, realistically, based on this team's spending, they're not going after Garrett Cole. They're not giving anybody long-term deals, but there are guys that fit in what they like that they'll go after. And those are the names I think you and I have talked about today on the program. And then you have the people that are blind faith. Like I get people who send me hate mail or hate emails or tweets, or some guy who told me he was never listening to my show again because I was like, Garrett Cole isn't coming here. Like, who are just blinded by the idea that well, since Rick said that the money will be spent, it'll be spent. That didn't mean they were going and getting Garrett Cole. And there are all these different camps now, and this is just such an amazing time to kind of watch White Sox fans all kind of at each other like, no, you're wrong. And we really don't know what's going to happen in this offseason, but I, like you, am fascinated just to watch it and just hope that we don't get the spring training going, wait a minute, nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the thing is, though, they kind of have to spend, right? And that doesn't mean that we're going to like it, but I mean, we just went over this. Like, they have $15 million committed. Like, so even to get to the 90 that they spent this year, like, they have to dole out some money, and I think they plan to, and I think there's a path to contention without signing a $300 million player. And I was all on board the Machado thing last year. You were as well. Many people were. Everybody heard my reaction to it. I hammered him and most of that was because, it was a guy that they coveted, and they botched it. It was like a perfect storm. Like it was the perfect guy at the right time. This year, not so much, right? I mean, you've seen what Yoan Moncada has turned into. So, and Anthony Rendon is probably going to stay in Washington or go to Texas or go wherever. Like, I don't care as much if they decide that they're not going to get Anthony Rendon, but they're going to sign, 3 offensive contributors instead of him. I mean, if it comes across the wire that Anthony Rendon's signing with the White Sox and he's going to play first base, like, I'd be ecstatic. But like that, why would he come here to do that? It doesn't really make any sense. There's also the camp on Twitter that, wants you to turn around and trade whatever prospects you can for one season of Mookie Betts or 1 or 2 seasons of Noah Syndergaard, and then, we'll just make them re-sign here because these people forget who owns the team. I mean, so some of this stuff is it's madness right now. As good as this World Series, I think, is about to be, I'm ready for the offseason to start so we can actually see what's going to happen. Yeah. Even though it probably won't happen until February.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm wondering, that was the next thing I was going to tell you. How long do you think it will be before we see the White Sox make any kind of move, with the exception of optioning out of the Wellington Castillo deal, which I swear if they don't do that, I'm going to have to put Dave on suicide watch. I mean, he came down the other day and he's like, I swear if they do that, if they keep Castillo for one more year, I'm done. And I don't even know if I could ever get him to come back here and talk again. He would literally just be done at that point. Do you think that I think they should strike quick. They have so many needs. If they're not going for all top tier talent and they have a plan, which they should have, because if all the fans can sit down and come up with plan A through plan Z on websites and talking back and forth with each other on Twitter and talking on podcasts, they should have like 15, 20, 150 different plans. They should have like a guy on there that shows up on like 75% of those plans are like, let's go get that guy like right now. He's like a mid-tier guy, sign him in the first couple of weeks and be like, at least now we know the direction that we're headed in. I mean, is there even a chance of that?
Right. I mean, that's where Grandal comes in. I mean, I guess I could see him signing like as soon as he hears what he wants because he's not a Boris guy. I mean, I'm sure Boris is going to take his guys late into the winter because that's what he does, and he has a million of them. I don't know how many of those guys the Sox are going to be after.
I don't want them to be after any of them, though, James. That's the thing. They should literally, at this point, have a policy that we don't talk to Scott Boras people because they never, ever get any of them, and they're always played by Scott Boras. We can do it without these 4 guys. We're not even going to look at these 4 guys. Let's sign these other guys and stay out of the Boras thing. And then you know what? If we get to February and there's still a guy we want to be in on and we've got 90% of our plan done, we'll jump in there because none of those guys are going to sign until the end of February.
Yeah, I mean, he has lots of clients, though. I mean, he has, like, Dallas Keuchel. He has, I don't know if he has Bumgarner or not. I'm not sure. But I mean, yeah, I mean, he has Cole and Rendon. He's going to play that out. I mean, the J.D. Martinez thing, I expect the White Sox to be involved in because, quite frankly, like, there's just not that many teams that he fits right now. So, I think the J.D. Martinez thing gets resolved early because I think he has to choose to opt out or not, like by 5 days after the World Series. That doesn't mean that he opts out and signs somewhere right away, though. So, and I think the first meetings, the GM meetings, are like November 8th, 9th, 10th, something like that. I mean, we used to hear about deals at those meetings, but now you don't even hear about deals at the winter meetings. So, I don't know. I mean, I think their first fairly significant signing will come prior to the winter meetings.
By the way, Legacy Agency representing Madison Bumgarner, so it's not Scott Boras. So he's on my list still. He's still on my list, so I'm excited about that. All right, that's James Fox. You can read all of James's stuff. He's on Future Sox, and he's also on From the Sideline Sports. You can read all that stuff at FromTheSidelineSports.com. That is formerly The Loop Sports. James, I love it every time that you come on, and I look forward to some fun conversations this winter. I felt like we were having a great time together, you and I. Then the Machado thing happened, And then it dampened things. And I've told myself I'm going into this offseason saying that happened. It's done. It's over. Yeah, sure. If this thing does not work out, we may all be sitting around saying that was the sign that they were never going to do what we thought they were going to do. But I want to hope, and I need hope, especially in the offseason. I need hope. And so I am going to, again, reluctantly throw myself into the arena of hope and hope that something big is going to happen, and hopefully the two of us will be rewarded for that.
Yeah, it's like Pandora's box, right? They put hope into the world, and that's, yeah. I guess it's all we have at this point.
That's all we have. James Fox, thanks a lot, bud.
Thanks, man.
Imagine if an ex-U.S. Marshal, registered nurse, and current military chaplain, who is also a neighborhood priest, sat down at my 9-foot homemade oak bar, poured himself a drink, and answered any question I asked him. Now imagine if I really asked everything. That's Me and the Priest. It is another great 30-minute podcast from the Broadcast Basement Network. Maybe check it out after this show. It's found everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at meandthepriest.com. I want to say thanks once again to James Fox. He writes for Future Sox and also From the Sideline Sports. You can find both of those at websites with those names with .com right after them. He did me a great favor by coming on the show this week, not only to impart some knowledge and kind of talk about the things that he's heard behind the scenes, but also because Dave wasn't able to make it. Get well soon, buddy. We will see you next week. The way the flu or whatever this is, this fall ickiness that is going around is going through the Lanuti household. I am the last man standing right now. So you may get an entire episode of Angry Dave next week. Wouldn't that be fun? So let's think about what James just said here in the last few minutes. On this episode of Sox in the Basement, brought to you by Joseph's Finest Meats. I didn't get them in yet. Joseph's Finest Meats, simple, old school Italian butcher shop, showcasing prime aged beef, chops, and homemade sausages. Seriously, it's really good stuff. It's old school. It's old world. There's a little old Italian guy. Him and his sons, they cut everything. 7101 West Addison Street in Chicago. Joseph's Finest Meats. Nobody beats their meat. All right, so let's think about what James said. Let's break down like the things that I took from this conversation as I try to figure out, can the White Sox do something exciting in the offseason? Let's just talk about what he thinks they could spend. Based upon what they're going to have to spend when they do their arbitration, based upon what they're going to have to bring into the season before they get to free agency, he said $80 million. He thought $80 million could be spent in 2020 in new contracts, is what I took from that conversation. Let's take what James is talking about and see what the White Sox could actually get. Let's look at Madison Bumgarner. I like him. Let's say that the White Sox can convince him to give up hitting on a regular basis in the American League and tell him, look, when the game's out of reach, Madison, we'll pinch hit you every once in a while and let you play the field in the ninth inning in those blowout games. And he goes, that's good enough for me. Show me the money. Looking at the fact that the guy made not that much money in the past year, I think it was like at about $12 million. Let's give him a big bump. Let's get crazy. Let's say that he costs something like he's going to be somebody that you're going to give 4 years to or something like that. Or 5 years to, like you give him something long, it's kind of spread out, it's staggered, but let's say you're spending, let's say, $24 million a year on Madison Bumgarner. All right, so we'll take that $24 million. Now let's talk about somebody else, the other pitcher he's talking about, Jake Odorizzi, or a guy that I really like, Alex Wood. Get that guy in there, because both of those guys have demonstrated that they can not only be starting pitchers at the back end of a rotation, but can easily move into that long relief role and move back and forth within that relief role. So they could be anything this year. It gives you flexibility. They can go the entire year, or if everybody works out, they're not blocking anybody. Looking at the fact they both made under $10 million last year, and they're not front-end starters, and giving them a raise. Let's give them a raise, okay? We're going to give them a raise, $12 million, okay? So we're going to give them $12 million. And then let's go with the exact contract that James thought that Yasmani Grandal could get, which comes out to about $17.5 million a year. At that point, the White Sox will have only spent $53.5 million in salary, well below what they would need to just get to what James is saying at about 110 to 120. which is still well below the league average, where he believes they're going to end up. You could add JD Martinez in by going higher in 2020 is what he's going to make, and actually giving him more money in the next 2 years. Like JD's getting like about $23 million, then like he goes down to 17 for the next 2 on that Red Sox contract. He opts out, you give him 24 across the board. You can even give him a little bit more because that only gets you to 77.5. Think about that. Grandal, Martinez, Bumgarner, and either Wood or Odorizzi. Would that make you excited? Now, I don't know if I believe in Martinez. I don't know if Bumgarner is going to give up hitting. I don't know what other people are going to offer out there, but the stage is set. I'm ready for the show. And now we here at Sox in the Basement want to hear from you. This is what I want you to do this week. I want you to sit down. I want you to go online. I want you to look at all the salaries that are out there, what people expect people to make in free agency. And I want you to look at what the White Sox need and spend somewhere around $80 million. Give or take $10 million in either direction. And give us a call, because I would love to hear what people think the Sox should do. You play GM, and Jerry Reinsdorf is your owner. So you don't be unrealistic here. Jerry Reinsdorf is your owner. You're the general manager. 708-459-8406. 708-459-8406. Call and tell us what you would do. 24/7, 365. You can call that number and leave the message. If you don't like talking, hit us up on Twitter at Sox in the Basement, the Sox in the Basement Facebook page. We're on Instagram at Sox in the Basement, and we will see you next week. For fans, by fans, all Sox, from my 9-foot homemade oak bar in my basement on the south side of Chicago. Me and my buddy Dave, just talking about our team and hoping for more in 2020 and big things this offseason. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.